The silence that followed in that bank office was the longest of my life. I was sitting there in the manager's lounge, waiting my turn to renew my card, when I heard her. The unmistakable voice of Amanda, my own daughter, reached my ears like a sharp blade cutting through everything I believed to be true in our relationship. I shouldn't have listened to that conversation, but fate sometimes has cruel ways of revealing the truth. She hadn't seen me arrive. She was too focused on her mission to notice my discreet presence in the corner of the room. It was there, as I hid behind an ornamental plant at the First National Bank of Westville, that I heard the words that would forever shatter the image I had of my only daughter. "My mother is no longer mentally fit to manage her own money," she told the young manager in a gentle voice, completely different from the authoritative tone she used with me at home. "The doctors have confirmed that she's developing dementia. I need access to her accounts to look after her interests. She's had several episodes of confusion, bought things she didn't need, lost money." Amanda paused dramatically, then lowered her voice to a whisper that I could still hear perfectly. "She's senile and completely crazy. Just give me her money." That moment froze in my memory like a painful photograph I could never erase. I, Martha Wilson, a 67-year-old widow who had worked as a nurse for over 4 decades, saving every penny to ensure a comfortable retirement and support my only daughter, was being declared insane behind my back. And not by a stranger, but by the child I had raised alone after the untimely death of my husband, Richard, 25 years earlier. I could have walked into that room right then and there and confronted Amanda. I could have screamed, cried, made a scene. But something inside me, perhaps the same instinct that had guided me through the most difficult moments of my nursing career, made me stay quiet and keep listening. And it was precisely that decision that would completely change the course of my story. What Amanda didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined as she smiled persuasively at the manager, was that Robert Parker, the senior manager at that branch, had known me for over 30 years. He was just a young teller when he began managing my finances after Richard's death. Robert saw me through every difficult phase, guided me through every investment, and knew exactly how lucid and careful I had always been with my money. "Do you have any medical documentation proving this condition, Mrs. Collins?" Robert asked in a neutral tone that didn't reveal his true suspicions. "I'm taking care of it," Amanda replied quickly, her smile faltering for a second. "But as her only child and legal guardian, I need to take these steps now. She's had dangerous episodes before. Last week she almost burned down the house by forgetting to turn off the stove. A blatant lie. I hadn't cooked in months because Amanda had insisted on hiring a helper for me. A woman named Debbie who seemed more like a spy than a caregiver, constantly reporting my every move to my daughter." "I understand," Robert said, shuffling through some papers. "But we need to follow protocol. We need to review some documents and perhaps schedule a meeting with your mother present." "That'll only stress her out," Amanda argued, her voice now carrying a note of urgency. "She gets very flustered in formal settings. Dr. Taylor said we need to avoid situations that will overwhelm her emotionally." Dr. Taylor. I had never heard of a doctor by that name. I had never been diagnosed with any form of dementia or cognitive impairment. My trusted physician, Dr. Harris, always praised my memory and lucidity at every annual checkup. It was at that moment that I realized the full extent of Amanda's plan. It wasn't just an opportunistic attempt to get my money. It was something that had been in the works for months, maybe years. The small changes in my home, objects that disappeared and that I had supposedly lost. The concerned comments about my memory to friends and neighbors. Her insistence that I stop driving because it was dangerous. The mysterious calls she answered in another room. It all made sense now. Suddenly, I realized that I was in a battle for my own identity and freedom, against the person I loved most in the world. "I'll need an official report signed by an expert," Robert said, his voice firm. "And anyway, we need Mrs. Wilson present for any changes to your accounts." He paused, then added, "By the way, what a coincidence. I believe your mother has an appointment today. Let me check." He pretended to consult his computer, though I knew he was just giving himself time to think. Amanda's face paled. "Today," She didn't mention anything about coming to the bank. Maybe she forgot to mention it, Robert replied with a slight tone of irony that only I, having known him for so many years, could detect. Impossible. Debbie would have brought her. She doesn't go out alone anymore. It was then that I decided it was time to make my entrance. I packed my bag, took a deep breath to quell the searing pain of betrayal, and walked firmly to the office door. I knocked lightly and entered without waiting for an answer. "Good morning, Robert," I said in the calmest voice I could muster. "Am I late for our meeting?" Amanda's expression was something I'll never forget for as long as I live. A mixture of shock, horror, and something else, fear. For the first time, my daughter looked at me with genuine fear in her eyes. "Mom!" she exclaimed, quickly recovering. "What are you doing here alone? Where's Debbie? You know you shouldn't go out alone." "I dismissed Debbie this morning," I replied calmly, sitting down next to her. "I thought I needed some fresh air and a walk to the bank. Robert and I have some matters to discuss regarding my investments." Robert, a man in his late 60s with graying hair and shrewd eyes, looked at me with an expression that mixed relief and concern. "Mrs. Wilson, it's so good to see you. Your daughter was just telling me about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, looking directly at Amanda, whose face was now alternating between red and white. "And what situation would that be?" "Mom," Amanda interjected quickly, her voice suddenly sweet and condescending, as if speaking to a child. "You know we've been worried about your forgetfulness. I was just explaining to Mr. Parker that it might be best if I helped you with your finances for a while." In that moment, I could have exploded. I could have confronted every lie, revealed that I had heard everything. But something told me the game needed to be played more intelligently. If I showed how hurt and betrayed I was, Amanda would find a way to distort my emotions as symptoms of instability. "How kind of you to be concerned," I replied with a calm smile. "But as I was explaining to Robert yesterday on the phone, I'm considering some new investments for my retirement. In fact, I'm thinking about taking that trip to Europe I've always dreamed of." I turned to Robert casually. "I brought all the documents you requested so we can review our options." Amanda was visibly disturbed. "What trip? You never mentioned any trip. And what documents?" "Mom, you're confused again." Robert watched our interaction intently, his practiced eyes capturing every nuance of the disturbing scene. Then he did something that would completely change the course of events. "Wilson," he said formally, "before we discuss your investments, I would like to perform our routine verification for important transactions." He picked up a form and continued, "Could you tell me your full address, date of birth, and the last 4 digits of your social security number?" Without hesitation, I provided all the information accurately. He then asked more challenging questions about my current investments, interest rates, and even recent news events. I answered everything accurately and clearly. Amanda's face grew increasingly tense. She tried to intervene several times, but Robert, with decades of experience handling delicate situations, managed to maintain control of the conversation. Finally, he smiled at me and said, "Everything seems to be perfectly in order, Mrs. Wilson. Now, about those investments for your trip to Europe." It was then that Amanda lost her composure. "This is ridiculous. She's just having a good day, that's all. Don't you see what's going on at home? The confusion, the forgetfulness. Mom, tell the truth about the fire last week." "What fire, dear?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The stove. You forgot the stove was on and almost burned the house down," she practically screamed, frustration evident in her voice. Robert looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "Amanda," he said calmly, "I haven't used the stove in over 2 months. Debbie cooks all the meals, at your insistence. And our stove is electric, not gas." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably and then said, "Ms. Collins, I think we need to discuss this situation more calmly. Perhaps we should reschedule for another day, when we can have all the necessary medical documents? Amanda stood up abruptly. This is absurd. She's manipulating you. She's always been good at hiding her problems. Then, turning to me with cold eyes I'd never seen before, she said, "Let's go home now, Mom. You're clearly overwhelmed and confused." That was the turning point. I could give in, go home, and remain trapped in that web of lies and manipulation, or I could finally take a stand. I chose the latter. "No, Amanda," he said firmly. "I'm not going home now. I have business with Robert. Private matters concerning my finances." Her face contorted into an expression that was a mix of anger and panic. "You can't do this. You're not okay." "Mrs. Collins," Robert said in a calm but firm voice, "I believe your mother has every right to discuss her finances privately if she so wishes. I see no evidence of incapacity that would justify otherwise." That's when Amanda made her biggest mistake. Completely losing control, she screamed, "You don't understand. That house is practically mine. I deserve that money after everything I've been through with her. You don't know what it's like to live with a mother like her." The shock of those words hit me like a physical blow. The pain was almost unbearable. But at the same time, there was something liberating in finally hearing the raw truth laid bare. Robert stood, his face now serious and professional. "Ms. Collins, I believe this meeting is over. I will have to ask you to leave so I can see your mother in private." Amanda looked around like a cornered animal. Then, grabbing her purse, she said in a voice shaking with anger, "This isn't over. You'll regret this, Mom. When you really need me, I won't be there." After she slammed the door, I sat in silence, shaking internally but maintaining a calm exterior. Robert offered me a glass of water and waited patiently for me to compose myself. "Martha," he said finally, using my first name now that we were alone, "how long has this been going on?" That's when the tears I'd been holding back finally began to fall. They weren't just tears of sadness, but also of relief. Relief that someone finally saw what was happening. Relief that I was no longer alone with my suspicions and fears. "I think it started about a year ago," I replied shakily. "Little things at first. Comments about my forgetfulness when I couldn't find something. Suggestions that I was confused when we disagreed. Then came Debbie, the helper, who actually monitors my every move and reports back to Amanda. Then it was my car, which I supposedly couldn't drive anymore. My cell phone, which broke, and was replaced with a simpler model without internet access. Friends who stopped calling because Amanda said visits made me agitated." Robert listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, he looked at me with a seriousness I'd never seen before in his kind eyes. "Martha, what your daughter is doing has a name. It's called elder abuse and financial exploitation. And unfortunately, we see it more often than we'd like to admit." Elder abuse. The word sounded strange and unreal. How could I, a former nurse who had spent my life caring for others, become a victim of abuse? How could my own daughter, the girl I had raised with so much love after becoming a widow, become my abuser? "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling simultaneously strong for having faced Amanda and terribly vulnerable about what lay ahead. "First," Robert said, "let's make sure your finances are secure. I'll change all your passwords and add extra layers of security. Then, I strongly suggest you consider alternative housing options, at least temporarily." Leave my own home? The idea seemed absurd to me at first. "Martha, you just witnessed how volatile your daughter can be when crossed. I don't think it's safe for you to go back to that house today, knowing she'll be there, furious and possibly determined to reassert control over you." The reality of those words hit me hard. He was right. I couldn't just go home as if nothing had happened. Not after what I'd witnessed today. "I have a sister in Cedar Rapids," he said thoughtfully. "Nancy and I aren't as close as we once were, but maybe." "Excellent," Robert replied. "I'll help you withdraw enough money for your trip and initial expenses. I also suggest you seek legal advice as soon as possible. What your daughter attempted to do today is potentially criminal." The word criminal made me shudder. How had we gotten to this point? How had my life turned into this nightmare where I had to flee my own daughter and consider legal action against her? But as Robert efficiently organized everything to ensure my immediate financial security, a new feeling began to grow within me. It wasn't just fear or sadness. It was determination. Determination to reclaim my life, my independence, and my dignity. That same afternoon, with a small suitcase containing only the essentials, I boarded a bus to Cedar Rapids. I left behind the home I had lived in for over 3 decades, the memories of a life with Richard, the dreams I had nurtured for my daughter. But I took with me something far more precious, the newfound strength to fight for myself. What I didn't know at the time was that my journey was just beginning. That the battle with Amanda would be just the first chapter in a complete transformation in my life. That terrible day at the bank would, ironically, be the beginning of the most empowering and revealing period of my existence. As the bus left Westville behind, I looked out the window at the town that had been my home for so long and thought about what Amanda had said to the bank manager. "She's senile and completely crazy. Just give me her money." Little did she know that those words, instead of destroying me, would be the spark that ignites within me a strength I didn't even know I possessed. Nancy's phone rang 3 times before she answered. Her voice, familiar but distant after years of contact only on holidays and special occasions, sounded cautious as she said, "Hello." "Nancy. It's Martha." I paused, suddenly aware of the strangeness of what I was about to ask. "I need your help." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Nancy and I never had the kind of relationship where we asked each other for favors. After our parents died, we went our separate ways. She moved to Cedar Rapids with her husband, Frank, and I remained in Westville with Richard and then alone after his death. "Martha, did something happen?" The concern in her voice was genuine, which gave me the courage to continue. "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about Amanda. She..." How to explain the inexplicable? How to summarize what had happened in a few sentences? "She's trying to take control of my finances. She's telling people I have dementia, which isn't true. Today I caught her at the bank trying to convince the manager to give her access to my accounts." Another silence, longer this time. "Oh my God," Nancy finally said. "Martha, this is very serious." "I know," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "And I can't go home now. I'm scared of what she might do." "Where are you?" Nancy's voice now had an urgency that comforted me. "On a bus to Cedar Rapids. I'll be there in about 4 hours." "I'll pick you up at the station," she said without hesitation. "You'll stay with us as long as you need." The relief I felt was so intense that the tears I'd been holding back all day finally began to fall freely. "Thank you, Nancy." I didn't know where to turn. "We're sisters, Martha," she said simply. "We'll always be here for each other, no matter how much time passes." When I hung up, I looked out the bus window at the rapidly passing countryside. The sky was beginning to darken, and the first stars were timidly appearing. In a few hours, I would be at my sister's house, far from Amanda and her manipulations. It would be a temporary refuge, I knew, but it would give me time and space to think about my next step. My mind inevitably returned to Amanda. Where had I gone wrong as a mother? How had I missed the signs of her greed and dishonesty? I'd always thought we'd been close, especially after Richard's death. She was only 15 when he passed away, and going through the trauma of losing her father had brought us closer in a way I believed was unshakable. Or maybe she was just faking that closeness? Doubt was like poison in my heart. How many years of our relationship had been genuine, and how many had been an elaborate performance targeting my retirement savings? The roar of the bus engine and its gentle motion lulled me into a state of reflective melancholy. I remembered Amanda as a child, with her blonde curls and infectious laugh. Amanda as a teenager, determined and brilliant, earning a partial scholarship to State University. Amanda as an adult, marrying Lewis, a man who never seemed good enough for her, but whom I accepted because she seemed happy. Lewis. Thinking about my son-in-law raised new questions. Was he involved in this plan? Did he know what Amanda was trying to do? Or was he just another victim of her manipulations, like me? Their marriage always seemed turbulent. Lewis, an accountant who never held down a job for long, always seemed to be trying new ventures that invariably failed. Amanda often complained about her financial difficulties, especially after the birth of Emily, my granddaughter, who was now 8. Emily. My heart sank as I thought of the girl. I loved her deeply, and the thought of not seeing her for an indefinite period was painful. She would be another victim in this sad story, caught in the middle of a conflict she neither understood nor deserved. Immersed in these painful thoughts, I barely noticed that the bus had stopped at a small station for a brief break. A few passengers got off to stretch their legs or buy snacks. I decided to remain seated, irrationally fearing that if I got off, Amanda would somehow find me. My cell phone, the basic model Amanda had given me after my smartphone broke, vibrated in my coat pocket. Heart pounding, I checked the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. Martha, it's Robert from the bank. Just checking to make sure you're safe. Amanda showed up at the branch again, demanding information about your accounts. Don't worry, we won't reveal anything. Stay in touch. The message simultaneously comforted and alarmed me. It was comforting to know that Robert was keeping his word to protect my finances, but alarming to imagine Amanda returning to the bank, likely furious and determined. I replied briefly, on the bus to Cedar Rapids. I'll be there in 3 hours. I'll be staying with my sister. Thank you for everything. As I put away my phone, I noticed my hands were shaking slightly. It wasn't just emotional stress. I realized I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. The small cafe at the bus station looked unappealing, but I knew I needed to keep my strength up. Gathering my courage, I got off the bus and bought a sandwich and a bottle of water. As I ate, sitting on an uncomfortable plastic bench, I allowed myself to consider the future for the first time since leaving the bank. What would happen now? Could I return to my home in Westville? Would I need legal protection from my own daughter? How would I explain this situation to Emily? The driver announced that we would resume our journey in 5 minutes. I quickly finished my sandwich and returned to my seat on the bus. As we pulled away from the small station, I tried to focus on the practicalities of the situation rather than getting lost in the emotional pain. I had substantial savings, the fruit of decades of hard work and frugal living. My house was completely paid off. I was in good health for my age and had all my mental faculties intact. She wasn't a helpless victim, I reminded myself. She was a capable, independent woman who had faced challenges before and overcome them. Richard's untimely death had been devastating, but I had found the strength to carry on, raise my daughter alone, and build a meaningful life. This betrayal, painful as it was just another obstacle to overcome. With that resolution firmly in mind, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to rest for the rest of the journey. The worst was over. I had discovered the truth and taken action. What came next would be difficult, but I would be prepared. When the bus finally arrived at the Cedar Rapids station, it was already past 9 o'clock. I got off with my small suitcase, looking around anxiously. The station was relatively empty at that hour, with only a few scattered passengers and taxi drivers waiting for customers. Martha. The familiar voice made me turn. Nancy was there, waving vigorously. Beside her was Frank, her husband of 40 years, a quiet, gentle man I'd always respected, even though I didn't know him very well. Walking up to them and being enveloped in Nancy's tight embrace was like arriving at a safe harbor after a storm. "I'm so glad you called," she murmured in my ear. Frank took my suitcase with a kind smile. "Welcome, Martha. The guest room is ready for you." In the car, I told them the full story. Debbie's constant surveillance, the little comments suggesting my supposed mental confusion, the gradual removal of my independence, and finally, the incident at the bank that morning. "This is absolutely horrific," Nancy said, turning from the front seat to look at me with wide eyes. I never imagined Amanda was capable of something like this. Frank, ever the pragmatist, kept his eyes on the road as he asked, "Do you have a lawyer, Martha?" "No," I admitted. "I've never needed one before." "Well, you need one now," he replied firmly. "I have a colleague who specializes in elder law. I'll call him tomorrow." Nancy and Frank's house was exactly as I'd imagined. Welcoming, organized, and comfortable, reflecting my sister's down-to-earth personality. The guest room had a soft bed and windows overlooking a small backyard. "We'll talk more tomorrow," Nancy said after showing me where everything was. "Now you need to rest. It's been a hard day." Alone in my room, I unpacked my small suitcase, containing only a few clothes and toiletries I'd managed to grab before leaving home. At the bottom of the suitcase was the only extravagance I decided to bring: a small silver frame with a photo of Richard holding baby Amanda in his arms. I stared at the image for a long time before placing it on the nightstand. "What would you say now, Richard?" I murmured to the photograph. "How did we get to this point?" That night, despite the comfort of the bed and the sense of security my sister's home provided, sleep was slow to come. When I finally did, I dreamed of closed doors, dark hallways, and Amanda's voice whispering accusations I couldn't fully understand. I woke early, momentarily disoriented by my unfamiliar surroundings. The clock on my bedside table read 5:47 a.m. Through the window, I could see the sky beginning to lighten, promising a sunny day. I got up quietly, not wanting to disturb Nancy and Frank. On the small desk in the room, I found a notepad and pen. I sat down and began doing something that always helped me organize my thoughts in difficult moments: making a list. Next steps, I wrote at the top of the page. 1. Consult a lawyer. 2. Ensure my finances remain protected. 3. Decide on housing, temporary and permanent. 4. Contact trusted friends in Westville. 5. Find a way to keep in touch with Emily. The last point gave me pause. How could I maintain contact with my granddaughter without going through Amanda? She would surely use Emily as a tool of manipulation, perhaps even poisoning her mind against me with stories of my supposed dementia. The sound of movement in the kitchen interrupted my thoughts. I put away my list and prepared for the day. Entering the kitchen, I found Nancy already dressed and making coffee. "Good morning," she said with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" "The best possible, considering the circumstances," I replied honestly. Over coffee, Nancy shared that she'd done some online research overnight. "There's a term for what Amanda's doing," she said, pushing her tablet toward me. "It's called gaslighting. It's a form of psychological abuse where the abuser makes the victim question their own sanity." I read the article she had found, recognizing with a shudder every tactic described: denying events that actually happened, hiding objects and then blaming the victim for forgetting, isolating the person from friends and family, gradually taking control over aspects of the victim's life like finances and social contacts. "That's exactly it," I murmured, feeling a mixture of horror and validation. "That's exactly what she's been doing to me." Frank joined us soon after, already on the phone. "Yes, Tom, it's an urgent situation." "Yes, today would be perfect if you can." "Great, we'll be there." Hanging up, he announced, "Tom Johnson can meet us at his office at 10 o'clock. He's the best elder law attorney in town." Tom Johnson's office was located in a modern building in downtown Cedar Rapids. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a kind expression but shrewd eyes, listened to my story attentively, occasionally taking notes. "Mrs. Wilson," he said when I finished, "unfortunately, what you're describing is not uncommon. I see cases like yours with increasing frequency. Is there really something we can do legally?" I asked. "Absolutely," he replied firmly. "First, we'll file for a temporary protective order, considering your daughter's attempts to exploit you financially. This will legally prevent her from contacting you or attempting to access your accounts." "An order against my own daughter," I repeated, the reality of the situation hitting me again. I know it's difficult, Tom said gently, but we need to protect you while we resolve this situation. Additionally, we will prepare formal documents reaffirming your mental capacity and financial independence. A full medical examination with a cognitive assessment would be helpful to officially establish that you don't suffer from any condition that affects your decision-making ability. I nodded, trying to absorb all this information. What about my house? Can I go back there? Eventually, yes. But for now, I recommend you stay with your sister, at least until we have the protective order in place. Your daughter is likely very emotionally unstable right now, and we don't want to take any chances. When we left the lawyer's office, I felt simultaneously exhausted and empowered. There was a concrete plan in place. I wasn't helpless. Let's stop by the mall before we head home, Nancy suggested. You need more clothes and personal items. The idea of spending money when my future was so uncertain made me hesitant, but Nancy insisted. It's an investment in your independence, Martha. You can't depend on the few things you brought with you forever. At the mall, while we were picking out basic clothing and toiletries, my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't immediately recognize. Hello. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Wilson? This is Debbie. The voice of the helper Amanda had hired to watch me sounded nervous. Debbie, I replied, surprised. How did you get this number? You're on my emergency contact list, she explained quickly. Look, I know you left, and I know why. I just wanted you to know that not everything Amanda says about me is true. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. She hired me saying you needed help with memory problems, but I quickly realized there was nothing wrong with you. When I questioned her, she said it was to monitor for early signs of dementia. I became suspicious when she specifically instructed me to report anything you forgot, even minor things. Why are you telling me this now, Debbie? There was a pause. Because she's furious, Mrs. Wilson. I've never seen her like this before. She's telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown and ran away, that she's worried for your safety. She even called the police to report you missing. My heart raced. The police. Yes, but don't worry. They didn't seem to take it too seriously after she couldn't provide any medical documentation to back up her claims about her mental health. And someone from the bank apparently called to clarify the situation. Robert, I thought gratefully. He must have gotten ahead of himself and contacted the authorities. Thanks for letting me know, Debbie. Wilson, she continued, her voice quieter now, there's one more thing you should know. I found some documents in Amanda's office yesterday while tidying up. They appeared to be forms related to the sale of her house. They were already partially filled out. The shock of this revelation left me momentarily speechless. Was Amanda planning to sell my house? The place where I'd lived for decades, where I'd raised my family. I took pictures of the documents with my phone, Debbie continued. I can send them to you if you find them helpful. Please do, I replied, my resolve strengthening. And Debbie, thank you for your honesty. When I hung up, Nancy looked at me with concern. Everything okay? I told her about the call as we walked to the parking lot. We need to get back to the lawyer immediately, she said, her expression serious. This changes everything. Back in Tom Johnson's office, I showed him the photos Debbie had sent. His face grew more and more serious as he examined the images. This is extremely serious, he finally said. Your daughter was trying to forge your signature on property transfer documents. This is not only unethical, it's criminal. What do we do now? I asked, feeling strangely calm at this new revelation. I will contact the police and present this evidence. I will also expedite our request for a protective order. And, with your permission, I will place a legal notice on your property records, preventing any transfer without extensive verification. While Tom made calls and prepared documents, I sat next to Nancy in the waiting room, trying to process everything that was happening. How could she? I murmured, more to myself than to my sister. How could she plan something like that against her own mother? Nancy held my hand tightly. I don't know, Martha. But you're not alone in this. We'll get through it together. That night, at a table in Nancy's kitchen, I sifted through the photos Debbie had sent. Besides the property transfer documents, there were other papers, bank statements of mine I'd never seen, copies of my will. How had Amanda gotten that? And most disturbing, a document titled Mental Capacity Assessment with the name of a doctor I'd never seen. She was building a whole case, Frank commented, looking over my shoulder. Meticulously. But why? The question that kept nagging at me. Amanda never seemed interested in money when she was younger. What changed? Nancy, pouring tea for us all, sighed. People change, Martha. And sometimes we didn't even know them as well as we thought. The truth in those words stung, but it was impossible to deny. Did I really know my daughter? Or had I only seen what I wanted to see all these years? Frank's phone rang, interrupting our dark thoughts. He left the kitchen to answer it and returned moments later with a worried expression. It was Tom, he said. The police went to his Westville home with a warrant to investigate the fraud allegations. Amanda wasn't there, but they found more incriminating documents and, Martha, it seems she had started selling off some of her belongings. What? I exclaimed, feeling a fresh wave of shock. What belongings? Apparently some valuable items, silverware, jewelry, some antique furniture. A neighbor mentioned seeing a moving truck 2 days ago taking away several things. I closed my eyes, trying to control the anger and pain that washed over me. The family silver that had belonged to my grandmother. The jewelry Richard had given me over the years. The furniture we had chosen together for our first home. The police are looking for Amanda now, Frank continued. Tom said she'll be called in for questioning as soon as she's located. The reality that my own daughter was being sought by the police was almost surreal. How had we gotten to this point? What choices, what events, had led Amanda to become the person she now appeared to be? That night, as I tried to sleep in Nancy's guest room, I allowed myself, for the first time, to truly feel the full extent of my loss. Not just the material loss of the items Amanda had sold, but the much deeper loss of the daughter I thought I had. I cried silently for hours, tears soaking the pillow. I cried for the girl with golden curls who had been my companion after Richard's death. For the teenager who had made me proud with her academic achievements. For the young woman who gave me the joy of being a grandmother. At some point, that loving daughter had transformed into someone capable of devising a meticulous plan to declare me mentally unfit and steal everything I had built in my life. Where had I failed as a mother? What could I have done differently? Eventually, physical and emotional exhaustion led me to a restless sleep, populated by confusing dreams in which Amanda was simultaneously the child I loved and the adult who had betrayed me. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Appointments with the lawyer, a full evaluation with a recommended neurologist, who confirmed what I already knew, that I was cognitively intact, meetings with the police to give detailed statements, and long conversations with Nancy trying to reconstruct the events of the past few years, looking for signs I might have missed. Amanda remained missing. Neither the police nor her lawyer could locate her. Her cell phone was turned off, and Lewis, when questioned, claimed she had left saying she needed to take care of some things, and had not returned. On the 10th day of my stay with Nancy and Frank, Robert from the bank called with troubling news. Martha, he said, his voice gravelly, there was an attempt to access your savings account yesterday. Fortunately, with the new security measures we've implemented, the attempt was automatically blocked. Was it Amanda? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yes. She tried to use a forged power of attorney. When our security team questioned the authenticity of the document, she fled the agency. We have security camera footage that was handed over to the police. The situation was escalating in ways I never could have imagined. My daughter, now officially wanted for multiple fraud attempts, had disappeared, possibly taking with her the items she managed to sell from my home. It was at this point that Tom Johnson suggested we take more drastic action. Martha, he said during our meeting that afternoon, considering the gravity of the situation and your daughter's clear determination to continue trying to access her assets, I believe we should consider a change in strategy. What kind of change? I asked cautiously. So far, we've been mostly reactive, responding to Amanda's attempts and trying to protect her assets. I think it's time for us to be proactive. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were documents detailing a surprising proposal: the sale of my Westville home and the creation of a trust with extensive legal protections to manage my assets. Do you want me to sell my house? The idea initially seemed as radical as it was painful. Think about it, Martha, Tom replied gently. That house is now a target for Amanda. She knows every inch of it, has access to keys, and knows the neighbors. As long as you hold that property, it will be a focal point for her fraud attempts. Nancy, who had accompanied me to the meeting, nodded thoughtfully. He's right, Martha. Besides, do you really want to go back to a place with so many painful memories now? The question caught me off guard. I had automatically assumed I would eventually return to Westville, to my home, my routine, my friends. But Nancy was right. Everything would be different now. Every corner of that house would remind me of Amanda's betrayal. Every interaction with friends and neighbors would be colored by the knowledge of what my daughter had tried to do. Where would I live? I asked finally. Cedar Rapids has excellent options for people in your situation, Tom replied. Safe condos, active senior communities, even smaller homes in quiet neighborhoods. With the money from the sale of your Westville home, you could buy something here outright and still have a nice surplus to invest. The idea began to take shape in my mind. A new beginning. A chance to reinvent my life, far from the shadow of what had happened. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, Tom smiled understandingly. It's not a decision to be made quickly. But I'll start preparing the trust documents anyway. This added protection for your assets will be helpful regardless of what you decide about the house. When we left the office, Nancy suggested we take a walk in the nearby park to clear our heads. The day was surprisingly pleasant for that time of year, with the golden autumn sun illuminating the multicolored trees. What do you think? I asked her as we walked. About selling the house and moving here? Nancy considered the question for a moment before answering. Honestly, I think it would be good for you. A fresh start, away from the painful memories. And she hesitated briefly. It would be nice to have the chance to reconnect as sisters after so many years. The sincerity in her voice touched me. Nancy and I had never been close as adults, but in the past few weeks, she had proven to be a pillar of strength and support I never would have expected. Thank you, she said simply, squeezing his hand. For everything. As we continued walking, I observed the families in the park. Children playing, parents watching, grandparents smiling proudly. The sight inevitably made me think of Emily. My granddaughter was now in the middle of this whirlwind, likely confused and frightened by her mother's sudden disappearance and the stories that were undoubtedly circulating. I need to find a way to talk to Emily, he said suddenly. She must be so confused by all this. Nancy nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we can contact her school? Or maybe Lewis will allow a supervised visit. The idea of needing permission or supervision to see my own granddaughter was yet another painful reminder of how drastically my life had changed. But Nancy was right. We needed to consider Emily's well-being above all else. I'll ask Tom to contact Lewis, I decided. Legally, Amanda can't stop me from seeing Emily, especially now that there's an ongoing investigation into her actions. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call. It was Lewis. Martha. Her voice sounded hesitant, almost fearful. Can we talk? Sure, Lewis, I replied, keeping my voice neutral as I signaled to Nancy, who was in the kitchen with me, that something important was happening. I don't know where to begin, he said after a moment of silence. But I think you deserve to know the truth. About Amanda. About everything. My heart raced. I'm listening. I didn't know, he began, his voice cracking. "I swear I didn't know what she was planning to do with you. She told me you'd agreed to sell the house to help us with our financial problems. That you wanted to move to a smaller place, easier to maintain." "Louis, I never said anything like that," I replied firmly. I know that now." He paused, and I could hear the sound of his heavy breathing. "The police came to our house yesterday. They showed me the documents they found, the attempted fraud, everything. I'm in shock, Martha. I can't believe she would do something like that." "Where is she, Louis?" I asked directly. Another pause. "I'm not sure. She called 2 days ago, said she was working through some things and would be back soon. She mentioned something about a lawyer in Chicago. I'm worried, Martha. That's not like her. But she was, I thought. She was exactly like the Amanda I discovered over the past few weeks. Manipulative, devious, determined to get what she wanted at any cost." "And Emily?" I asked, moving on to the topic that concerned me most. "How is she?" Louis's voice softened. "Confused. Scared. Asks about her mother constantly. And about you too. Can I see her?" The question came out almost like a plea. "Yes," Louis replied without hesitation. "Actually, I think it would be good for her. I've been trying to protect her from all this, but she knows something is wrong." We arranged to meet the next day. Louis would bring Emily to lunch with us at a restaurant in Cedar Rapids. The thought of seeing my granddaughter after everything that had happened filled me with both joy and apprehension. The next morning, I dressed with special care, choosing colorful clothes that Emily always liked. Nancy helped me prepare a small gift for her, a book on constellations, reflecting her recent interest in astronomy. The restaurant we chose was family-friendly and welcoming, with private tables that gave us space to chat without interruption. I arrived 20 minutes early, too nervous to wait at home. When I finally saw Emily walking in, hand in hand with Louis, my heart leaped. She ran toward me as soon as she saw me. "Grandma." Her squeal of joy drew glances from other customers, but I didn't care. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I missed you so much, darling," he said, feeling tears in his eyes. "Why did you disappear?" she asked, her big blue eyes, so similar to Richard's, looking at me with confusion. "Mom said you were sick and needed to be alone for a while, but I knew you'd never leave without saying goodbye." The simplicity of childlike faith touched me deeply. Even with all the lies Amanda had probably told, Emily instinctively knew I would never abandon her willingly. "I had some important matters to attend to, dear," I replied carefully, aware of Louis's watchful gaze. "But I never, ever wanted to be away from you. You're my precious granddaughter." Lunch went surprisingly well. Emily chatted about school, her friends, and the science project she was working on about the solar system. Louis remained quiet for the most part, occasionally contributing to the conversation, but mostly observing our interaction with a thoughtful expression. When Emily went to the bathroom, accompanied by Nancy, Louis leaned over the table. "Martha, there's something else I need to tell you," he said quietly. "Something I only found out last night." The seriousness in his tone made me alert. "What is it?" "I found some documents in Amanda's office at home. It seems she and James were having much bigger financial problems than I realized." James. The name made me shudder internally. James Collins was Louis's younger brother, a man I'd never fully warmed to. There was something about him that always seemed false to me, an excessive charm that masked a manipulative personality. He and Amanda had always been close, perhaps too close for Louis's comfort. What kind of problems? Debt. Lots of debt. Apparently, they tried some kind of joint investment about 2 years ago. Something real estate related. It went horribly wrong. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "And you didn't know that?" Louis ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen him make many times over the years. "Amanda always handled our finances. She said it was better that way, since I had no head for numbers. I trusted her completely. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Just as I had confided in Amanda, Lewis had also been kept in the dark about crucial aspects of his own life. Do you think? I began, hesitant to voice the terrible thought that had just occurred to me. That James might be involved in the scheme against you? Lewis finished my question. Yes, I think it's very possible. In fact, the more I think about it, the more sense it makes. Amanda has always been easily influenced when it comes to James, ever since she met him. A new character now entered the dark unfolding story, one who could have been the catalyst for my daughter's transformation from someone I thought I knew into a stranger intent on destroying me. Emily and Nancy returned to the table, interrupting our conversation. I tried to maintain my composure for the rest of the meal, but my mind was now working feverishly, connecting dots that had previously seemed unconnected. James Collins. A charming and persuasive man with a history of questionable financial schemes. A man who had always shown a peculiar interest in the family's finances. A man who, I now realized, had begun appearing with increasing frequency at our house after my 65th birthday, when I received the full payout from my life insurance policy. As we said goodbye in the restaurant parking lot, I hugged Emily for an extra moment, not knowing when I would have another chance to see her. "When are you coming home, Grandma?" she asked innocently. Before he could formulate a thoughtful response, Lewis intervened. "Grandma's thinking about moving to Cedar Rapids, near Aunt Nancy. Wouldn't it be nice if we could visit her here sometimes?" Emily considered the idea for a moment before agreeing excitedly. "Can we come on weekends? And on vacation?" "Of course, dear," I promised, giving Lewis a grateful look for his unexpected help. As I watched them leave, Nancy put a comforting arm around my shoulders. "She's a lovely girl," she commented. "And Lewis seems to be on her side now." "Yes," I agreed thoughtfully. "And he just gave me a new piece to the puzzle. I think we need to talk to Tom about James Collins." Back at Nancy's house, I immediately called my lawyer and shared the new information. Tom listened attentively, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. "This is significant," he said when I finished. "It adds a new angle to the case. I'll report this information to the police immediately. They'll probably want to investigate this James guy further." In the following weeks, several things happened quickly. Police intensified their search for Amanda, now expanding the investigation to include James Collins. Lewis, cooperating fully, provided access to bank accounts, emails, and other documents that revealed a disturbing pattern of financial transactions between Amanda and James over the past 2 years. Meanwhile, with Tom's help, I put my Westville house on the market. The decision, though painful, felt increasingly like the right move. Nancy and Frank helped me connect with a reputable real estate agent in Cedar Rapids, and we began visiting potential new homes in the area. It was during this time that I received another unexpected call. It was from Marge Johnson, my neighbor and longtime friend from Westville. "Martha, dear," she said when I answered, her voice shaking slightly. "I just saw something you need to know. Amanda's back." My heart raced. "In Westville? At my house?" "Yes. A taxi dropped her off about half an hour ago. She looked different. Haggard. She tried to use a key, but it apparently didn't work. Now she's sitting on the front porch, looking lost." The news left me momentarily speechless. I had had all the locks changed after the investigation began, a precaution suggested by Tom. "Do you want me to do something?" Marge asked hesitantly. "Should I call the police?" I thought quickly. Amanda returning to the empty house, unable to enter, looking dejected. What did that mean? Was she regretting it? Planning another attempt to access the property? Or did she simply have nowhere else to go? "Marge, can you see if she's alone? Is James Collins with her?" "I don't see anyone else. Just her, sitting alone with a small suitcase." I made a decision in that instant. I'll call Detective Henderson right now. He's in charge of the case. Please continue to observe discreetly and keep me informed if anything changes. Immediately after hanging up, I contacted the detective in charge of the investigation. He listened attentively and then said, "I'll send a patrol car over there right now. If she's there, she'll be taken in for questioning." The thought of my daughter being taken away by the police caused me profound pain, despite everything that had happened. She was still Amanda, the child I had cradled, the teenager whose tears I had wiped, the young woman who had become my grandmother. Will she be treated with respect? I asked, my voice betraying my concern. Don't worry, Mrs. Wilson. There's no arrest warrant out for her yet, just a warrant for questioning. If she cooperates, the process will go smoothly. 2 hours later, Detective Henderson called back. We were able to locate your daughter at the residence, as reported. She came with us voluntarily and is now giving a statement at the police station. How was she? I couldn't help but ask. There was a brief pause. Visibly shaken, but cooperative. In fact, she asked to speak with you. The news caught me off guard. With me? Yes. Obviously, the decision is yours. There is no legal obligation to meet with her at this time. But if you decide to do so, we can arrange a supervised meeting here at the police station. Nancy, who had overheard my side of the conversation, looked at me with concern when I hung up. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air as I considered my options. Part of me wanted to never see Amanda again, to protect myself from the pain and betrayal her presence would inevitably bring. But another part, the mother part that persisted despite everything, needed to understand. I needed to look into her eyes and try to comprehend how we had gotten to this point. I'll see her, I finally decided. I have to do this. For myself. The Westville police station was a modest red brick building in the center of town. When I walked in, accompanied by Nancy and Frank, who insisted on coming with me, I was immediately greeted by Detective Henderson. "Wilson," he said formally, "your daughter is in an interrogation room. She has already given a preliminary statement and provided some interesting information about James Collins that we are verifying. Now she is waiting to speak with you, if you still wish to meet." "Yes," I replied firmly. "I'm ready." Henderson led me down a hallway to a small but well-lit room. Through a glass window, I could see Amanda sitting alone at a table. She seemed smaller somehow, as if she'd physically shrunk since the last time I'd seen her. Her face was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. "We'd like to record the meeting, if you don't mind," Henderson said. "It might be relevant to the research." I nodded in agreement. I had nothing to hide. "I'll be watching through the glass," he continued. "If at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to end the conversation, just signal and I'll come in right away." With one last look at Nancy, who gave me an encouraging smile, I entered the room. Amanda looked up at the sound of the door, and our eyes met for the first time since that fateful day at the bank. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came." I sat in the chair opposite her, keeping a safe distance. I didn't respond immediately, taking a moment to really observe her. Her normally perfectly styled blonde hair was disheveled. Her hands, resting on the table, trembled slightly. "Why, Amanda?" The question came out simple and direct, carrying the weight of all my pain and confusion. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I don't know where to begin. How about at the beginning? When exactly did you decide it would be a good idea to declare me mentally incompetent and steal everything I've built in my life?" The harshness in my voice seemed to frighten her. Amanda had always known me as the kind, understanding mother who rarely raised her voice or showed anger. "It didn't start out that way," she said finally. "At first, it was just conversations with James. About how your house was too big for you alone. About how it would be more practical for you to move to a smaller place. About how you could help us financially if you sold the house." And when did these talks turn into a plan to declare me insane? She visibly flinched at the word, insane. James said you'd never agree to give us the money voluntarily. That we needed a strategy. That families do this all the time. Take over financial control when parents get older. I'm 67, Amanda. I'm healthy, lucid, and perfectly capable of managing my own life. I know, she murmured. I've always known. The admission hung between us like a silent accusation. Then why? I persisted. Because of debt. Lewis mentioned something about an investment gone wrong. At the mention of her husband's name, I saw something pass across Amanda's face. Shame, perhaps? Or fear? James had this plan, she began hesitantly. A real estate venture that seemed foolproof. He convinced me to invest. At first, just our savings. Then we took out loans. When it all fell apart, we were drowning in debt. Debt Lewis didn't even know existed. And you decided the solution was to steal your own mother? The disbelief in my voice was palpable. James said it wasn't stealing, she replied defensively. He said the money would eventually be mine anyway, as an inheritance. That we were just getting things done. Her voice cracked. I know it sounds awful now. I have no excuse. Where is James now? I asked, noticing how she continued to place much of the blame on him. Amanda hesitated visibly before answering. I don't know. I really don't know. After you disappeared and the bank refused access to your accounts, he was furious. He said I'd ruined everything. That I should have been more careful. That now we'd have to speed up the plan. What plan, Amanda? She looked up, her eyes finally meeting mine, filled with an emotion that seemed genuine. I don't know exactly. He never told me all the details. He just said he had a plan B if things went wrong. That's when I realized how far things had gone. How wrong everything was. And that's when you disappeared? She nodded slowly. I went to Chicago, to a college friend's house. I needed to think, away from James, away from everything. That's where I saw the news about the investigation, about the police looking for me, about the charges. Her voice trailed off again. About what I'd done to you. Silence fell between us again. Part of me wanted to believe there was sincerity in her words, that she truly was sorry. But another part remembered how easily she had lied before, how thoroughly she had tried to destroy me. Why did you come back? I asked finally. To try to make things right, she replied quickly. I know it's probably too late. I know you'll probably never forgive me. I wouldn't forgive myself. But I needed to go back, face what I did. And she hesitated. Warn you about James. Let me know. The fear in her eyes seemed genuine now. He's desperate, Mom. People we owe money to aren't the kind to accept excuses. James is cornered, and cornered people do dangerous things. A shiver ran down my spine. Do you think he could hurt me? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But he was so furious when everything started falling apart. I've never seen him like that before. And he knows where Nancy lives. He's mentioned Cedar Rapids several times in the last few weeks. The implication of her words wasn't lost on me. If James really was behind much of this plan, and if he was as desperate as Amanda suggested, he could pose a real danger. I told the police everything, Amanda continued. Every conversation, every plan, every document I signed. And she swallowed. I'm ready to face the consequences of what I did. I looked at my daughter, this stranger who had masterminded my financial and emotional ruin, but who now seemed genuinely remorseful. What should I do? Believe her? Forgive her? Or keep my defenses up, guard against the possibility of further manipulation? Amanda, I finally said, I don't know what to make of all this. I don't know if I can believe you now, after everything that's happened. What I do know is that what you did. My voice trailed off briefly. What you did broke something between us that may never be completely repaired. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't try to wipe them away. I know. But I also know that you are my daughter, I continued, surprising myself with the words that followed. And that, despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed by this. I will ask the police and the prosecutor to consider your cooperation when they determine formal charges. Her eyes widened in surprise. You would do that? After everything? Not for you, Amanda. For Emily. She's already confused and scared by everything that's happening. I don't want her to grow up with her mother in prison if we can help it. The mention of her daughter seemed to hit her hard. More tears fell as she nodded in understanding. As for us, I continued, I'll need time. A lot of time. I don't know if we'll ever be able to have a normal relationship again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you without remembering what you tried to do. But I'm willing to leave that door ajar. For Emily. And maybe, someday, for ourselves. It was the most she could offer at that moment. No grandiose promises of forgiveness. No emotional declarations of unconditional maternal love. Just the stark truth of where we were and the possibility, tenuous, fragile, that someday we might begin to rebuild something from the ruins. When I left the interrogation room, I felt strangely lighter, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been partially lifted. Nancy hugged me silently, respecting the swirl of emotions that were surely evident on my face. Detective Henderson approached with a grave expression. Ms. Wilson, your daughter has provided valuable information about James Collins. Based on what she told us, we believe he may pose a threat. We would like to suggest some security measures for you in the coming days until we can locate him. The reality of the situation hit me hard again. The nightmare wasn't completely over yet. 3 days later, I received the news. James Collins had been located and arrested at a motel outside Cedar Rapids. Police had found in his possession forged documents bearing my signature, a detailed floor plan of Nancy and Frank's house, and, most disturbing, an unregistered handgun. He was definitely planning something, Detective Henderson said during our phone conversation. The information your daughter provided was crucial to finding him in time. The news brought a contradictory mix of emotions. Relief that James was in custody. Horror at the thought of what he might have tried to do. And, surprisingly, a touch of reluctant gratitude toward Amanda for returning and alerting the authorities. Over the next few weeks, my life began to take shape again. With James arrested and facing multiple serious charges, and Amanda cooperating fully with authorities, which resulted in reduced charges to attempted fraud, rather than completed fraud, I could finally focus on rebuilding my future. My house in Westville sold for a surprisingly good price considering the market. With the proceeds, I purchased a charming bungalow in Cedar Rapids, just 10 minutes from Nancy and Frank's house. It was smaller than my previous residence, but perfectly suited my needs. 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for guests, especially Emily. A cozy office where I planned to rekindle my old passion for writing, and a small garden where I already envisioned planting flowers the following spring. Tom helped me establish a robust financial trust with significant protections against future fraud attempts. I also updated my will, establishing a provision for Emily that would be administered by independent trustees until she reached the age of majority. Lewis and I developed a cautiously friendly relationship, mostly centered around Emily. He brought my granddaughter to Cedar Rapids every 2 weeks, allowing us to maintain our special bond. During these visits, he occasionally mentioned Amanda, who had accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office involving probation, community service, and financial restitution in lieu of jail time. She's in therapy, Lewis told me during one such visit, as Emily excitedly explored my new garden. Really trying to understand why she did what she did. Why she allowed herself to be so manipulated by James. I nodded without comment. I wasn't ready to discuss Amanda extensively yet, much less consider her a part of my life again. Time would tell if that would ever change. Nancy and I, on the other hand, developed a closeness we'd never experienced as adults. We had lunch together regularly, shared hobbies, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. It was during one of these lunches, about 6 months after I moved to Cedar Rapids, that she made an insightful observation. "You look different, Martha. Stronger. More confident." I considered her words as I sipped my coffee. I guess I'm different now. I've spent my entire adult life being the caregiver, as a nurse, as a wife, as a mother, and as a grandmother. I've always put the needs of others above my own, often without even realizing it. And now I'm learning to take care of myself first, to set healthy boundaries, to say no when necessary. I smiled slightly. Who would have thought that at 67 I would finally learn these lessons? Nancy returned my smile. "It's never too late to grow up, little sister." That evening, sitting on the porch of my new home, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of pink and orange, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months. From the devastation of Amanda's betrayal to the unexpected reconciliation with Nancy, from the near loss of everything I had built to the creation of a new life that, surprisingly, felt more authentic and fulfilling than the last. The experience transformed me in ways I never could have anticipated. It forced me to examine painful truths, to confront my own naivete, to recognize the patterns of codependency I had inadvertently established with my daughter. But it also showed me my own strength. A resilience I didn't know I possessed. The ability to start over, even when it seemed like all was lost. The words Amanda had whispered at the bank, "She's senile and completely crazy. Just give me her money," that had once cut me like knives now felt distant, almost as if they'd been addressed to someone else. That vulnerable Martha Wilson, the one who trusted blindly, the one who feared being alone, had been replaced by a wiser, stronger, and ironically, younger at heart version. As the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, I raised my teacup in a silent toast to the future. A future that, for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely eager to explore. If you identified with my story, leave a like to help me reach more people who may be going through similar situations. Tell me in the comments, have you ever faced betrayal from someone close to you? How did you overcome it? Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, where we share experiences that can help us grow and strengthen each other. Remember, it's never too late to start over and discover your own inner strength.